The first frost of November came down on Eli Hatcher's 11 acres the same night. Someone walked through his fence and poisoned his last milk cow. He found her at 6 in the morning. Her name was Hattie. She was 10 years old. She was lying on her side near the water trough with white foam dried around her mouth and her tongue gone dark, and the bucket of feed beside her smelled faintly of something that should not have been in feed. Eli stood there in the gray light with his breath coming out in slow clouds, and he did not say a word. He just took off his wool cap and held it against his chest. A truck rolled past on the gravel road behind the fence. It slowed. A window came down. A man laughed. Not loud, not cruel exactly, just enough that Eli heard it carry across the cold field. Then the truck drove on. The bank had taken 63 of his 74 acres back in March. The auction had been short. The men who bid had been his neighbors, and one of them, Caleb Monroe, had stood at the front in a clean navy jacket and bid on the south pasture without ever looking at Eli once. Now Caleb's cattle grazed on land Eli's father had cleared by hand in 1958. 11 acres were all Eli had left. A barn, a house, a greenhouse he'd built with Ruth before she got sick. A well, a wife buried under a young oak at the edge of the property. And on her grave, 6 months ago, he had laid the family Bible. Inside that Bible, between Lamentations and Ezekiel, was a sealed white envelope she had left him before she died. On it, in her shaky last handwriting, were 7 words. "Open this only when you have nothing left, Eli." He hadn't opened it yet. Has there ever been a week, maybe just one week, where you genuinely did not know if your family was going to make it? You don't have to tell me the details. Just tell me what year. I read every comment on this channel. By noon that day, the whole village knew Hattie was dead. By sundown, 3 of them were laughing about it at the diner. Eli Hatcher was 64 years old, and he had farmed the same patch of Breathitt County, Kentucky, for 41 of those years. His father had cleared it. His grandfather had carried the deed across the Cumberland Gap in a tin box in 1911. The Hatcher name was on a corner marker stone half buried in a fence row nobody walked to anymore. He had married Ruth McAllister in the spring of 1979. She was the daughter of a tobacco farmer 2 ridges over, and she came to the Hatcher place with her mother's recipe box, a King James Bible with a cracked spine, and a small brown notebook she would not let anyone touch. She kept that notebook for 43 years. Eli never once asked what was in it. Ruth raised heirloom things. She kept Cherokee Trail of Tears beans her grandmother had carried from Tennessee. She kept a strain of yellow tomato nobody else in the county still grew. She kept a small kitchen garden behind the greenhouse that fed the 2 of them and half the church potluck for 30 years. She got sick in the autumn of 2022. Pancreatic. Quick. She lasted 7 months, and she was buried under the young oak the 2nd week of May. Eli planted that oak the morning after the funeral. He was alone when he did it. Their daughter Margaret had flown in from Lexington for 3 days and then flown back to her 2 children and her job at the hospital. Margaret called every Sunday. She asked the same 3 questions. Are you eating? Are you sleeping? Are you going to church? Eli answered yes, and most Sundays. 2 of those 3 were lies, and they both knew it. Is there something you wish you had said to your father or your grandfather about the land, about the debt, about the sacrifice? Some of you are carrying that right now. I see you. Tell me what you'd say to them today if you could. The bank had started writing letters in January. By March, the auction notice was nailed to the courthouse door. Eli had walked past it 3 times before he could read it without his hands shaking. He paid off what he could. He kept 11 acres, the house, the barn, and the greenhouse Ruth had loved. He thought that would be enough for a man to finish out his days on. He was wrong about that, and Caleb Monroe was the reason. Caleb Monroe was the kind of man who smiled while he hurt you. He owned 410 acres, 200 head of cattle, the feed store on Highway 15, and most of the seats on the church board. His father had been the same way before him. People called the Munros generous to their face, and something else when the door closed. 3 weeks after Hattie was buried in the back lot, Eli walked into the feed store to buy a 50-pound bag of greenhouse compost. Caleb was at the register. The store went quiet the way a room does when everyone has already been talking about you. Caleb leaned on the counter and smiled and said, loud enough for the 4 men by the coffee pot to hear, "Eli, you sure you can afford a whole bag? We sell it by the handful too, if that suits a farm your size." The men by the coffee pot laughed. One of them was a deacon at Eli's church. Eli paid in cash. He carried the bag to his truck himself. He did not turn around. That was the start of it. By December, somebody had cut his fence twice. By January, the village was calling his place the postage stamp. By February, 2 teenagers had spray painted. For sale, 11 acres of nothing. On the side of his barn in white house paint. And when Eli scrubbed it off in the cold with a wire brush and well water, his hands cracked open and bled into the snow. Margaret begged him to sell. "Daddy, come live with us. There's a room. The kids would love it." He told her no. He told her Ruth was buried under that oak, and he wasn't going to leave her there alone. Did you ever watch a parent work a piece of land so hard it scared you? Not just tired. I mean the kind of tired that doesn't come back. The kind where you start wondering if the work is the only thing keeping them alive. Leave a comment. Tell me about them. In late February, on a Tuesday afternoon, when the sky was the color of dirty tin, Caleb Monroe drove a tractor with a brush hog along the fence line between his pasture and Eli's and cut down every fruit tree on Eli's side that had grown a single branch over the wire. 8 apple trees, 2 pear, 1 peach tree Ruth had planted the year Margaret was born. Eli stood at the kitchen window and watched. He did not come outside. He did not call the sheriff. He folded his hands on the sill, and his mouth moved in a shape that was not quite a prayer and not quite a curse, and he did not move from that window until the sun went down. That night, Eli went out to the barn at a little past 11. The wind had stopped. The sky had cleared. The cold was the clean kind that hurts your teeth. He carried a kerosene lantern. He sat down on an upturned milking stool in the empty stall where Hattie used to stand. He didn't pray right away. He didn't know what to say. He sat there with the lantern at his feet and his hands hanging between his knees, and he listened to the barn breathe, the small creak of old wood settling, the soft scratch of a barn cat in the loft, the wind moving through a knothole somewhere above his head. 41 years he had farmed this dirt. 41 years, and every year a little less of it was his. He thought about Ruth. He thought about the morning she had pressed the sealed envelope into his hand and folded his fingers shut around it and said, "Not yet, Eli. You'll know." He thought about how he had put it in the Bible because he could not bear to put it anywhere a man might be tempted to open it. He thought about Caleb Monroe's father, Frank Monroe, who had died in 1989 and whose funeral Ruth had refused to attend. Ruth, who attended every funeral. Ruth, who brought a casserole to every wake in the county for 40 years. Ruth had stayed home that day, and she had not told him why. He stood up. He walked into the house. He took the Bible off the shelf above the sink. He turned to the place between Lamentations and Ezekiel. The envelope was there, cream white, his wife's last handwriting on the front. "Open this only when you have nothing left, Eli. R." He held it for a long time. His thumb moved once across the seal. Then he put it back in the Bible. He closed the book. He set it on the kitchen table. "Not yet, Ruth," he said aloud, to a kitchen with nobody in it. "I've still got 11 acres. The next morning, he walked into the greenhouse with Ruth's small brown notebook in his coat pocket. He had taken it from her dresser drawer for the first time in 43 years. He sat down on a wooden crate. He opened it, and he began to read. What was inside that notebook would change everything by the following autumn, but that's for the part of this story I haven't told you yet. I'll come back to the envelope before this is over. You have my word. A year passed. Eli did not go to church much that spring. He did not go to the diner at all. He stayed on his 11 acres, and he worked. He worked the way a man works when work is the only language his grief still speaks. He read every page of Ruth's notebook. He learned what she had been keeping. 22 heirloom varieties, Cherokee beans, Ruth's yellow tomatoes, a strain of pale green watermelon her grandmother had brought from Tennessee in a feed sack in 1927, a purple pod okra nobody else in Kentucky still grew. 43 years of seeds Ruth had saved by hand, kept dry in glass jars in the cellar, labeled in pencil, prayed over at every planting. He used every inch of the 11 acres. The greenhouse ran year-round. He dug a second well by hand in April. He pickled, he canned, he dried. He traded a bushel of Ruth's yellow tomatoes to a chef in Lexington for the price of a month of feed. By June, he had a waiting list. By August, 3 Lexington restaurants were driving out to him. He told nobody in the village. He drove a different road to town now. The Breathitt County Fair came the second weekend of September. Eli had not entered a fair in 11 years. He entered 3 categories that year: heirloom tomato, heirloom bean, best small farm exhibit. The whole village was there. Caleb Monroe was on the judging board for cattle. When he saw Eli's small wooden table set up at the heirloom produce tent, Ruth's labeled jars, baskets of impossible yellow tomatoes, a hand-painted sign reading, Hatcher Heirloom, 11 acres, Breathitt CO. He laughed out loud and said something to the man next to him that made the man look at the ground. Eli took blue ribbon in heirloom tomato, blue in heirloom bean. In first place, best small farm exhibit, judged by a woman from the University of Kentucky Agricultural Extension who stood at his table for 20 minutes asking questions about Ruth's notebook. When she announced the prize over the loudspeaker, the tent went quiet. Then somebody clapped, then somebody else. Then the whole tent was clapping, and Caleb Monroe was walking out the back of it without his hat. A man from a Louisville seed company found Eli before he could leave the fairgrounds. He offered him a contract, 6 figures a year, just to grow Ruth's varieties under exclusive license. Eli said he'd think about it. He drove home in the dark with the blue ribbons folded in his coat pocket and his hand resting on top of them the whole way. He didn't open the envelope that night. He waited one more week. He opened it on the morning of Ruth's 2nd death anniversary. He took the Bible to the young oak. He sat down at the foot of her grave with his back against the stone. He broke the seal with his thumb. There were 2 papers inside. The first was a letter, 3 pages, in Ruth's careful hand. The second was a copy of a deed dated 1974, fragile, yellowed, with a notarized stamp, for 40 acres of pasture currently fenced and grazed by Caleb Monroe. The letter explained it. In 1974, Frank Monroe, Caleb's father, had forged Ruth's father's signature on a quitclaim and taken 40 acres for nothing. Ruth's father had known. He had been too sick and too proud to fight it. He had told Ruth on his deathbed in 1988, "The land is still ours, baby. The paper is in the courthouse archive. Box 14. I'm sorry I couldn't get it back for you." Ruth had gone to the courthouse archive in 1991. She had paid a clerk $50 to copy the original. She had kept it in the Bible for 32 years. She had never told Eli, "Because if I told you, you would have fought." She wrote, "And I needed you alive more than I needed those 40 acres back." Eli read the letter twice. He folded it. He put it back in the Bible. He did not take it to a lawyer. He did not take it to Caleb. He took it to the cemetery the next Sunday, and he laid it on Frank Monroe's grave, weighted with a stone, where Caleb would find it on Memorial Day. Caleb sold his farm and moved to Tennessee within a year. Eli kept his 11 acres. He signed a seed contract. He still drives a different road to town. I think about stories like this one because they remind me that some men answer cruelty with cruelty and some answer it with seeds. If this story brought something up for you about a piece of land, a person who mocked your family, a quiet one in your life who carried a secret to spare you a fight, I want to hear it. The comments on this channel are real. People read them. I read them. And the next person scrolling past needs to know they're not the only one who's been laughed at by a whole village. Tell me your year. Tell me their name.